Good evening, everyone. This is Nitin Jain here from Resurgent India, and I'm the AVP for Valuation and Investment Banking in the company. I'm the moderator for today's webinar on importance of ESOP in a startup venture, taking on the investor's perspective. So I, warmly welcome each of the participant and eminent speaker, and I wish the session would be highly knowledgeable for the each and everyone present in this webinar, and also for the one who are watching this through different channels. So I'm introducing the eminent speaker quite briefly. So we have Mr. Ashir Dewan, who is a CFO and company secretary with Core Diagnostics. We also have Mr. Som Tohi, the equity officer with Credit. Mr. Harsh Saraf, who is a co-founder of Key Ventures, and Mr. Subit Saurabh, who is our associate director at Avishkar Capital. So to start with, I would say startups are very critical nowadays in terms of overall economic development of any country, right? And looking at the current scenario, India is not exception to that, right? In fact, India has emerged as one of the leading startup ecosystem, having more than 100 unicorns at the moment, right? And recently, India also crossed UK in terms of size of GDP, crossing more than $3.3 trillion, right? So in a sense, we can say the startup has contributing, in a very significant manner, and nobody can deny their contribution overall GDP in India, right? So it's a very significant at this moment. Now, to make startups successful, there are many critical aspects, and one of the aspect is their founders, their key management and the instrument people who ensures with their commitment and long-term vision the success for the startup in the long term. Right? Now, to remain committed and ensure that a common path is followed to the success of the startup. ESOP, which is in employee stock option plan, plays a very critical role. It kind of eases the difference between shareholders and employees, and then ultimately is enables to distribute all rewards in a kind of a proportionate manner, and ultimately creating an environment of harmony where everybody feels that he is getting the due for his dues towards contribution, and ultimately making the company unicorn in the long run, and transforming the whole ecosystem, right? So from my ESOP perspective, what I can tell you is last year more than $400 million kind of ESOP buyback program was kind of launched or run by the startup companies. So in a sense, more than 3,000 crore rupees were distributed to employees who kind of actually given their heart and soul in the growth of the company from early stage. So you can understand the importance of ESOP where one at the startup company where everything is uncertain, contributes or kind of sacrifices career and kind of contributes towards a product solution which is not really kind of validated in the market on that moment, but believing in thought and having that long-term vision, it ensures that that transform that particular segment. Ultimately, the customer or the users and overall masses benefit through that. So ESOP again, plays a very critical role, and we're gonna be speaking about in quite detail in today's webinar, so that who are new entrepreneurs and new people who are looking to Tasha, they understand what are the critical aspects, and once they build a team, what are the certain elements that they can include, so that team can work together and whoever joins them, as a step-by-step approach, they also get their due in the long run. Right? So first of all, I will come to Mr. Ashish Singhal, who is a CFO and company secretary for Core Diagnostics. So my first question to you, Ashish, many startups, as we understand, have a very limited insight on ESOP, and many of them do not, even heard of this word and do not understand what it is, right? So what is the ideal stage that, a startup should think about the ESOP policy and build an understanding, right? And, what kind of ESOP reserve they should create? Because I'm asking this question because, Core Diagnostics has seen this journey all through, right? And
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so hi everyone. So as Nitin said, thanks Nitin for giving the intro. I'm Ashish Singhal. I'm basically chartered accountant and company secretary, and I'm working as CFO at Core Diagnostics Gurgaon. And I started my career with Coca-Cola India Inc. in way back in 2003. Core Diagnostics is a high-end oncology laboratory which was established in 2012-13, and we are having presence in India and abroad. Now we are into infectious range also, and we are expanding our presence to the new laboratories. Okay, so about this question, many startups don't even understand the ESOPs and they carry no insights about it. And we at Go Diagnostic, having gone through all of this, I can tell you in good detail. I'll try to first give you all the general overview of the ESOPs, and then I'll explain in detail the pros and cons so that you get to know about each and every. So I would say ESOP scheme needs to be properly structured. First of all, we have to structure the ESOP scheme. We have to select what is the type of the plan which we are going to launch, what is the employee group to which we are going to target it. Then we have to set aside the capital allocation for this, like 8 to 10% normally is kept at a holding level. We have to decide the frequency, at which frequency we are going to give ESOPs annually or milestone based. We have to decide the tenure of the ESOP, 4 years, 5 years. We have to select the discount from the current fair market value of the company. Uh, Startups are normally closely held and they don't have listing valuations available. So, fair market value, have to decide the discount from the fair market value, which is derived by the valuers. We have to decide the exit criteria, and then ESOP scheme needs to be drafted with the help of the lawyers. There are two type of mainly nature-wise two type of options are there, like equity settled or cash settled. Equity settled ultimately entitle the option holders to get the shares in the company. Cash settled, we get the cash at the end of the period. Then conditions, like I said, frequency of the rights, like it is annual or one time or milestone based. So normally, what I've seen is 78% or 80% companies do the annual frequency, annual rights are there. Then there's a milestone based is only 8% or one time allocation is only 8 or 9%. We have to decide the tenure, exercise period, exercise price. And exercise price is mostly it is the same price as on the date of the grant, so that employee can continue the growth. We have to decide about the liquidity event, how many ESOPs have to be granted. There's a lock-in period of 1 to 5 years. Normally 4 years is quite common, so that employee get engaged when the startup bubble is going to expand. And and vesting criteria are basically of 4 or 5 types: uniform, back-end, front-end, cliff, or milestone based. In the back-end, it is a higher vesting in the later period, and front-end there is a higher vesting in the initial period. In cliff, there is a single lump sum vesting in a particular date. Milestone is based upon the achievement. And as I said, 5 to 10% cap table is set aside. We have to also carefully see who will administer the ESOPs in terms of the records, accounting, taxation, valuation. So launching ESOP policy depends upon the seed investor or promoter normally, but ESOP should be introduced in the very beginning by creating a pool of fixed number of shares, and some ESOP should be allotted to the key founders or the key employees and founders. And in case of, it's like we have to set aside 8 to 10% of the capital stock. But in case of, if we talk about phantom stock option, which is new to the industry, you don't need to even dilute the capital. You don't need to allocate a pool from the equity. You can create a fake pool, and you can phantom stock options, PSOs, are basically given for the performance, solely for the performance, and employee feel motivated. Then it involves drafting ESOP scheme, passing resolution to create the pool, approval of the scheme. And ESOP scheme is a very detailed document to decide the creation, allotment, modification of the ESOPs, and deciding about the vesting criteria, closure. Normally, shareholders agreement and the subscription agreement may also contain some ESOP allotment clauses or conditions to promoters, founders, or key employees based upon terms and different agreement, different series or different time achievement of the milestones. And allotment of the shares as a transaction which is listed as a reserve matter as per the SHA conditions, shareholders agreement condition. For a startup company, it is difficult to attract the talent because nobody has seen the company and it is quite high risky. And if business idea floats successfully, then those people can earn millions by selling the vested ESOPs to a new investor. And it is reward to the employee for taking the risk of joining a budding company. ESOPs are also given to the vendors, like Amitabh Bachchan signed ESOP for the Just Dial, and now when this company got listed, he got this in the billions. ESOP also acts as a golden handcuff, like a golden chain. Like golden chain is normally you don't want to leave it. Like a golden handcuff can be explained like when we give large bonus or school payments to the employees, or company car, chauffeur-driven car, or an employee get like attracted to those things and they contribute their hard to hardest, like the best skill in the company. So ESOP also act like that. Then non-qualifying ESOP NSOs, those can be given to the vendors and consultants. Since employees are the heart of the organization, they know where their organization will head to, and they are best judged for choosing the ESOPs. Now I'll come to the like cons, like what are the basically things which normally we have to see. Uh, and cons normally these are into education of the employees, taxation, accounting, records, which is a nightmare. So like normally startup would get seed capital and then funding by VCF, and while founders who form the company are aware of the benefits of the ESOP, but employees down the line to whom ESOPs are being issued are ignorant of its value, terms, documentation, taxation process, and they need to be educated about the future value of the company and value of their ESOPs if they continue in the company. So, and shareholders agreement or the ESOP agreement also contain drag along and tag along rights. Drag along is basically right exercised by the promoter, and tag along is by the ESOP or minority kind of investors or shareholders. So they can include themselves in the exit event, which is an IPO or any significant event. Founders don't normally know the accounting implication and they need to be valued. The ESOPs need to be valued on the grant date, and they come to know when books are audited by the big four later on. The records of the grant vesting forfeiture, including grant letters, are not kept properly, and they come to know afterwards that these were very important. And then 8 to 10 years records are prepared at once, because then company earns profits and they can hire the good people in the finance or the in the strategy, and then they can normally do it. People to whom ESOPs are allotted, they think that it's a piece of paper and management is bullying them. People forget that how many ESOPs they have. They just ask finance department how many ESOPs I have, and they archive that mail and they don't keep a proper record of it. Collection of the KYC documents from the employees is a real challenge if employees are many. When the holding companies outside India, there are issues of different accounting practices and taxation. Mostly, like in case of US investors, they will follow US-based taxation clauses in the ESOP letters. In India, tax needs to be paid at the time of exercise of the ESOPs as a perquisite. And if employee leaves and company does not go public by then ESOPs are normally modified to defer the exercise period. So the employee does not need to pay the tax at the time of the exercise. And they waive their rights or they pay tax eventually. They might decide. If ESOPs are issued by the foreign holding company in case of a startup, and those who are not valued at the time of grant, then its exercise price will be paid at the holding company level in USD. And in case of foreign holding company, and later on when ESOPs are valued, then the amortization cost of the ESOPs is also accounted. ESOPs are numbers and not percentages. So if percentage holding, so their percentage holding as a percentage will go down in each funding round. So ESOP allotment to one employee and not to the other will create disparity. And in a startup, people get to know about others very quickly. Increasing the ESOP pool size will dilute the venture VCF holding percentage, and institutional investor holding normally not liked, and it is actually vetoed. Like what happened in Hero MotoCorp, Asian Paints, Mindtree, Khadim, Lupin, Polycap, Raj. The culture is just growing up. Exit conditions of the ESOPs is also subject matter dispute between founders and venture funders. They want stringent and founders need the liberal. Whether to pay Indian tax or pay tax as per the country, as per the rules mentioned in the letter, it's also subject to a disparity. Like normally says that US, according to US in NSOs, it is worked out as a perquisite, and then you pay capital gain. In case of incentive stock options, you pay the tax after you have to, there's a lock-in, and then you pay capital gain tax eventually. And then providing how many ESOPs granted, vested, outstanding on any date to the auditors are the complex calculation, and if record are not kept properly, there will be a problem. Cap table will show the ESOP numbers, and any mistake in the cap table would create trust issues between VCF and founders, because any single mistake can cause the trust issues, because they have to also report their US offices. I'm coming to the just last one. Valuation calculations are also very complex in case of ESOP. Like first of all, there are two methods of valuation as per the ICAI, Institute of Chartered Accountant. One is intrinsic value. Second is the fair value. Third one is the asset value approach, is not recognized as such. In intrinsic value, we normally value the share of the company by different criteria, and then we deduct the exercise price to know the real value of the share. And in case of so that is the value of the option, because option will be normally converted into share. In case of fair value, you have to apply the Black-Scholes model over the intrinsic value so that you get the exact the value of the ESOPs. Black-Scholes takes into consideration the vesting period, exercise price, and all. Normally, in case of a startup, the listed valuations are not available, so we have to use different like discounted cash flow method, which is also not very reliable because in the initial period the pictures are shown very rosy. And then so like we use normally there's a preferential funding round, series A, B, C, D. Then we take the backsolve method, which is a waterfall method based upon the liquidity percentage, and assuming it is created on based upon the assumption that the remaining residual amount will be allocated to the equity. So based upon that, you get to know the real price of the share, which is also like a indicative price. It also takes into account the volatility, marketability of the share and discount applied to that. So so like it is like this, and binomial method. It is actually Black-Scholes is actually binomial method, but auditors are normally following they take the fair value as per Black-Scholes, which is already discounted than the shares, and then they deduct the exercise price of the options, which is wrong. But I've seen many big fours are doing that. But the value of the fair value of the ESOP, which is coming as per the Black-Scholes model, is the fair value on which you have to carry the liability in the like the balance sheet. Yeah. So hope it answers the question.
Yeah, I think you have provided a very detailed overview of ESOPs, and also kind of touch upon or provided a comprehensive overview how the ESOP has to be handled within the organization, keeping a very long-term view, even up to thinking about the IPO. Right. Another side, employees has to be remain aware and be alert about the ESOP, not just taking it casually, right? Because it's the interest of their own reward and as well as linked to the long-term growth of the company. So thank you very much, Ashish, for those important questions. So now I'll come to Som. Right, Som represent fund Oiko Credit, and he's based out of Netherlands. So I appreciate that he is taking time and directly joining us from that location. So thank you very much. So I want to understand from an investor's perspective that what is the level of ESOP reserve which is more ideal, in accordance with the stage of the company, right, and how many key people would be there. But yes, at the start of any organization or where there are only few founders, it is very difficult to determine that what level of startup pool has to be created. So when an institutional investor come in, I think that can they can provide quite a good inputs towards that. So what's your view on that, and what kind of advice that you give to the founders and segment entrepreneurs?
Thanks, and thanks for the opportunity to speak today. So I'll be giving one of the investor perspectives, as you said, and I think a quick answer I would give to your question is it depends on terms of the ideal ESOP reserve pool. Ashish already mentioned 5 to 10%, which I've seen a lot in India. There's also a lot of exceptions. So I think it requires, it's not something that should be blindly done, right? It's something that you really have to put in a lot of thought about. There's a couple of perspectives. You can look at it from a high level at the ESOP plan, and you can look at it at a more granular level at the allocation of individual employees and see if both make sense. And maybe then you have to change things around when the two don't match up. So at the beginning of the process, promoters and investors in the cap table may have a rough ballpark figure for the ESOP that meets their needs given the business plan which they've agreed on, which is also always subject to iteration, right? And so that can basically identify a range of possibilities of the pool. And then the business really has to think about, given this business plan, who do I need to attract and retain to achieve this business plan? How do I attract and retain them, reward performance, and incentivize long-term contributions to the company? We recognize that startups, people are usually maybe not having the highest salary compared to where they could get elsewhere. So it's really important to reward good performance and that long-term thinking. So there are a few factors which affect this, and like quite a major one. One of the first ones is who are the promoters and founders, right? Because you have very different startups. Are they filling a functional role? Will they continue to do that? What function is that? And would they step down at some point in the process to be replaced by someone else? Because that all has an effect on what an ESOP pool can be, quite a major one. If the founders don't fulfill a functional role, then the ESOP will probably have to be larger, right? If you're going to have more C-level people coming in from elsewhere, because the founders already have shares. If they plan to step down during the lifetime, then that can also require a somewhat larger ESOP. So that's one of the first big variables. Who of the really major top-level C-suite people do we need, and when? That's something we really need to consider. But then you need to think about your hiring needs in combination, with the salary that your firm can pay these people. What kind of hiring needs and retention needs of the seniority, how key are the people, what's the scarcity of the function. Sector and location can have an influence on that, depending on what competition there is in that area, and also the sectors. I guess with startups, pretty much everything is in tech these days, but some of the sector will also have an influence. So you really have to think about that. So what is the employee proposition? So base salary plus the option plan, if they achieve the business plan or exceed it. So yeah, they're very big variables, and then you have to bear in mind that the first employees are going to get a larger chunk, and employees coming in later will get a smaller chunk, but with shares probably worth a lot more, hopefully. So yeah, that's some of the factors which can vary the ideal size. So really, it depends. And I think the second part of the question is who should be eligible. It's also covered a little bit in the beginning. I'll just explain a few points of mine that I think. This sometimes is also depends on the kind of the beliefs of the company, because there's some companies, by the way, which will go very, say, liberal and say, well, everyone who's contributing should be in the ESOP, and there's some which don't. So it really depends on what your philosophy is. But to say at the minimum, who should be eligible? And I say minimum because our venture capital, we always pretty much standard say, hey, we've got to have an ESOP if we want to have the business plan to be realized and risks to be mitigated. So the people building the product and the founding team is a big one. So that can be the founders, but that can also be key founders at the very early stage. So maybe with the first investment round, you're going to have to hire some people to build the product before you even, launch it into the market. These people are absolutely critical, working in probably a very challenging environment. So they absolutely should be eligible. Then you want to look at who is the next round of people that you want to hire, which are key. There could be senior people who will be leading, new divisions of the company as it grows a little bit bigger. It can be tech people which will develop the product a little bit further. And you may also have some support functions which you may not think are critical in terms of attracting people in the long term, but certainly in the beginning, pretty much everyone is critical, I would say. So really have to think about that. Again, it varies per company. And for all of these people, by the way, with the ESOP, it's not just the ESOP, but the initial ESOP, it's like going on after a few years, how are you going to retain them? So that's also something you have to think about in terms of future plans. Do you have an initial vesting schedule? Maybe there should be something after that, depending, again, on when you're going to, what your fundraising plans are and when you think you will IPO effectively. I think that's a summary of the key thoughts.
Yes, thank you very much for your inputs. And I believe you have pointed it quite rightly that, ESOP allocation is a very dynamic process. So you cannot just really follow one thumb rule or see that the particular percentage that the company can keep. but they have to understand that kind of people they are onboarding and what's the long-term vision, not only for the company, but also for the employees. And you'll definitely be having more employees as you grow the company. So you have to think from that point of view as well, right? So, there are, a lot of aspects to consider before actually saying that what is the ideal pool or what kind of policy that can be followed. So thank you very much for, your inputs. And I think, once any, the founders or the entrepreneur interact with investors, so they can get a lot of inputs on those aspects, right? And then you can, create a combined policy which is kind of, also favorable from an investor perspective and also from the perspective of long-term growth. Thank you very much. So now I will come to the Harsh, and he is the co-founder for Key Ventures. So, I think Harsh, you are interacting with a lot of startups on a day-to-day basis, right? And you want to, definitely talk with them on the ESOP aspect as well. So many times, my experience, and we see the scenario as a whole in the industry, that many founders at the moment do not understand the ESOPs, right? And when advisors bring the concept to them, suddenly they, feel, because it's also attract dilution in the cap table, there's a little, initial resistance come from their side. Right? So, what is your advice to, founders and entrepreneurs? And what is the kind of approach that they follow so that a more comfortable ESOP policy they can follow, which is not very complex, and ultimately, give them comfort that, this is the thing that they can take forward, and will benefit to each of the partner they are looking to onboard. Right. So, what do you say?
Thank you, Nitin. Thank you so much. I think it's a very pertinent question because given that we advise early stage startups in their fundraising, we face this more often than not, right? Because this has become a prerequisite, and as Soma already spoke about it, I'm sure Subit will also add, all investors need to see an ESOP pool. All investors, as a prereq, would always say they should have an ESOP pool. And from a founder's perspective, I think what is very important for them to understand is this company's equity that you hold is no value till you do not have a good team. And to keep team motivated, you really need them to be invested in the company. That is one thing which comes with the ESOP pools that you create, the ESOP allocations which you do. I mean, so very recently, I'll give you an example. So we are going through, I saw this article on LinkedIn, right? There's this one particular company. They made a chart in their HO where they show how has the price of the shares changed every year. What they have done is that they have created a small ESOP pool, given it to a few of these employees who are very key. And when these employees can see how it has appreciated in value for themselves, what value it's generating for them, they are actually so motivated to work. Everybody who walks into that office says that these guys are looking like a bunch. They're looking like a team and not just employees who are coming here to, achieve their targets. They're coming here to make a vision. So for founders, what is very important to understand, unless until the whole team is really motivated to achieve the vision of the company, it will never be possible. And ESOP has become a very strong tool to incentivize the team, to motivate the team to do this right. And yes, this comes every time whenever we are in a deal-making transaction, right? And it comes more often than not in situations where you have a single founder or two founders or founders who do not have core expertise in few pockets, right? Because in those situations, like Som said, looking at the current team that you have, the allocations have to change, and accordingly, the ask for the ESOP pool from an investor side changes. A lot of times, investors suggest that you need a larger pool because you will be attracting certain CXOs for which you really need to create a pool and incentivize them. And this pool always comes from the founder's equity. It cannot come from the investor's equity. In most cases, you will not see that the investors are diluting over here. It's founders who dilute when they have to create an ESOP pool. But they really need to understand is that if they do not create this pool, their own equity will not be that valuable. What they are doing when they create this pool is increasing the value of their own equity also, because they are creating a team which will make sure that the value of everyone's equity will grow. I think that is what I really think works best, and that is how you can derive value for founders. I don't know if I've been able to answer your question, but please.
Right. I think you have quite rightly mentioned that the founders need to understand this, that the shareholding structure will change from their aspect when they create a ESOP policy, and definitely it's very critical from the long-term growth of the company. Right? So ultimately, what matters is the growth of the company, and one or two people cannot do it alone. So they need a strong team to build that. And ultimately, they have to give, ensure certain incentive for them in the long run so that they remain committed. So thank you very much for your inputs. Now we'll come to Sobit, who is an associate director at Avishkar Capital. And Avishkar Capital, I think need no introduction. I think it's quite instrumental in impact investment in India, where team is more critical and they have to work on the ground and reach out to remote location to create that ultimate impact ultimately, right? So you must have seen a lot of startups and companies who already have ESOPs, or you also advise them on ESOP pool creation and how it should be structured. So as per your experience, how this ESOP pool has been, kind of effective in terms of keeping the team together, ensuring that, the company crosses their milestones in a very effective and in a structured manner. So, looking at the growth trajectory of any company who is part of your portfolio, how ESOP has helped to, keep the team together and make sure that all the targeted growth is there. So over to you, Sir.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Nitin, for the introduction. A very, very important question, Nitin. And as you rightly mentioned, we usually invest in early growth stage companies, and we work very closely with the company to build the ESOP structure and how it should be distributed, etc. But answering the first part of the question, how critical the ESOP is, or how does it help companies grow? I think my co-panelists have answered already. Their response covers parts of it. So very short answer is very, very critical, right? And the long answer is, I think all the founders or company representative on the call would easily identify that while founders are very, very critical for any company, in order to ensure the long-term growth and long-term success, they need to build a very strong team who are not just capable, but also very committed towards the vision of the company. Now, there are two parts to it. In order for the senior team to remain committed to the vision of the company, they should, from inside, they should feel that this is their company as well. And ESOP is one, I would say, one aspect. I wouldn't say that is the only aspect, but one aspect which helps the senior team make a belief that this is their company as well. It happens because they feel that they own a small percentage of the company. It happens because they can see the value of the ESOP that they're holding grows as the company grows. So they can see the fruit of their hard work in terms of a tangible benefit which comes. Right. Also, what is important is in the initial days, startups have limited resources, right? But you need to attract the best of the talent from the industry. And for that, you are not only competing with the biggies in the world, but today in India, you are competing with hundreds of startups who are also looking at the same talent pool. So how do you attract that talent? How do you make them join your company, your startup? It cannot. So one part of obviously the senior team need to believe in your vision and what you are trying to, what is solution or problem you are trying to solve. But then we are all humans, right? Just believing in the vision cannot keep you motivated till eternity. You also need to provide them some tangible benefit which will accrue in long term. And ESOP does that. So while you may not be able to give them their market salary, but the ESOP then provide them that that comfort that in case this company succeeds, what they're foregoing today, they will be able to recoup in the long term, right? And hence the commitment, I would say one part is believing in the vision. The second part is also working towards increasing the tangible value of what they're holding on their own. So that is the first part. But the second part of it, as an investor, we have the benefit of sitting on the other side of the table and see how other companies have done, what are the best practices, how it should be allocated. So that's where we work with the promoters or founders to help them create the ESOP pool. And as my co-panelist have mentioned, it is not a math. It depends upon what stage the company is, how many senior leaders you are trying to bring in, what what part can be given in terms of a salary, what part need to be given in terms of ESOP. All those things need to be considered. Also, what the startups need to do very early is have a very clear defined ESOP policy, right, which very clearly states that how these ESOPs will get vested, right, at what price it will get vested, at what point in time the employees will be able to liquidate it, how that liquidity will happen. Because many times we have felt that we have come across where many employees may feel that ESOP is just a piece of paper, because either they have not themselves seen the benefit of ESOP, or they don't understand how this will get liquidated. So these all things, obviously, one part is the promoters need to think of it, but as a early stage investor, we also need to, we definitely handle the promoters to make sure that they put all those things in place. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, definitely. I think you have given a good aspect that one's employee is kind of looking to get on board with a startup or the company, and ESOP is part of their kind of a package. Right? So ultimately, they need to get synchronized in the vision of the company, right? And then they will be able to contribute in the long run, right? And I think a lot of other aspect has to be kind of kept in mind when somebody is kind of explaining the ESOP policy, so that it becomes kind of understandable for both the sides. So I want to give one input on that I think there has to be certain efforts so that the people in the ecosystem understand the ESOP process, policy, allocation, vesting in a much more clearer manner. Because I think all of the panelists, one of the has mentioned that employees carry very little insight about ESOPs, and thus at the beginning they do not consider as more than a piece of paper. So at this point, I think there should be, or there could be some initiative to give them more awareness so that they take this policy more seriously. And ultimately, they take an informed decision that, okay, what they know what they are getting into and what they are signing. And ultimately, make efforts towards to, ultimately get those benefits in the long run, which also obviously will help the company. So thank you very much also. So now I will come back to Ashish, and I think, Ashish's company is a real example where we can showcase that somebody got an ESOP at an early stage, and when the company grew, they kind of got the benefit of ESOP on the ground. So like I mentioned initially through my discussion that last year more than $400 million US dollar of ESOP buyback scheme was launched, and the employees got millionaire through that, right? So there is a real reward that exists on the ground. So I would ask Ashish to give some real-time scenario where you have seen that the employees have really benefit through the ESOP policy and actually got rewarded in terms of multi-benefit to them. Right. So over to Ashish.
Yeah, thank you, Nitin, for asking this. So I will give you the practical thing. So in our company, we granted ESOPs to the founders initially, and then to the key employees. And after 5 years, we started giving ESOPs to the one level below, to the general managers as well, and leadership team. As we got down below the leadership team, there was a continuous need to educate them about the real value of this ESOPs. And we educated them in a one-to-one setting. Obviously, we can't hold the session throughout the company because a very handful of the people, they are getting the ESOPs. And so the modus operandi was we granted ESOPs to the 1 year lock-in. So like it was, and then there was 36 installments of the ESOPs on a monthly basis. So overall 4 years of vesting period, and there is an expiry period before which the ESOP has to be exercised. And we had initially we had some liquidity event defined in the letter, and thereafter when VCF came, they limited those liquidity event because the VCF don't want the equity to be diluted, obviously. So and when we go for the pool increase, we have to fight a battle that yes, we need it. It is a need of our, it's a actually act of the convincing to the investor that it is really needed. And then in terms of the benefits, like people who ESOPs were allotted, they are still working with us. And more and more people wanted more options as a company grew. And some people have even exercised the ESOPs and they are proud holders of our company. We grant the ESOPs where we have seen the employees are accepting the company as their own company and they would never leave. We can align the company's vision to the individual vision. Employees to whom ESOPs were issued, they feel that they are as class holders. And I've seen personally as a head of HR also that the people are doing their 2x after allotment of the ESOPs. And they are saving, they are dedicated, they were dedicating themselves to save the cost of the company as if they are owner of the company. If they talk to somebody in the company, the ownership tone actually likes coming out of them. And so some people had accelerated vesting clause also, if any, because those are very, very critical employees for us. And while leaving the organization, the employees would insist that they should be allotted the shares against their vested options so that they can liquidate it later on when company got listed. I hope we got the answer.
So, thank you very much for input, and I think you have quite well shown that how on the ground employees can benefit through ESOP. So at the time of allotment, they may see that they will have to wait for 2-3 years to kind of realize any real value, and that may or may not happen. But yes, if somebody waits patiently and contributes kind of with the commitment and the vision in the company, there is no doubt of the success of the company in the long run. And when the times come, they can definitely benefit significantly and continue to work with their organization and build something which they feel is their own and they have built it from the scratch, right? So that kind of confidence and feeling is, I think, is unmatched, right? So we can see the benefit of ESOP, which is maybe seen as a very
one more thing, Nitin. One more thing that when we initially allotted, people were resisting why we are getting the ESOPs with no value. But when company grew, sales grew, valuation grew, then people wanted more and more ESOPs. They were insisting that why I am the only person left, like ESOPs are not allotted to me. Why am I doing some bad work in the company? So there's a change of the mindset also.
So there is excitement in employees when they understand it fully and also see that people really getting benefits of that. So thank you very much, So I'll again come back to Som, right? So Som, we were discussing that many companies have launched their buyback programs and a lot of employees benefited. But I would say that's again very limited in terms of total number of startups we see who have kind of issued certain ESOP and ultimately give certain vesting and exercise employees. Right? That portion is quite limited. Many companies as a tendency they want to wait till IPO to kind of give proper exercising on benefit of ESOPs to employees. Right? And sometimes the IPO takes a lot of time to get realized. Right? So what is your advice to founders and companies? Is there any particular cycle that they should follow in terms of reviewing their ESOP policies or certain status of ESOP pool, and then decide that if they even may be limited, certain benefit should be transferred to employees, so that their motivation and excitement towards the growth of the company is not really kind of subsided any movement. Right? So your view is the startup has a long journey towards IPO, but in the meantime, if they keep certain milestone. And after that, they can review the policy and provide some benefits to employees. So your views on that?
Yeah, it's a great question and there's quite a lot to it. And I think I would say that honestly, there are a couple of takeaways here, which I'll go through in more detail. But it's good to flag a lot of things in advance in terms of a plan for your employees. And it's very good to have very good advisors, including valuers. And I'll explain why about valuation. So from a technical sense, if you're studying finance at university, you'll be thinking, why should a startup use its cash to buy back shares? Because you want to be pursuing growth opportunities, right? So you're growing quickly, and on the investor's side, valuations are probably getting quite high, depending on on the cycle, but and the business, but it's yeah. So why should the startup use its cash to buy back the shares? Well, usually how investors would expect to do it is that you're working towards a plan, either being to IPO or it could be to an intermediate round, right? And that's communicated especially to senior employees who are really motivated to meet that. And although there's a little bit more to it, which I'll go into as well. But so you've seen recently that there's been quite a few in the past few years in India, small as a percentage, but there are firms who've had good years and then they have said, okay, well, let's just buy all our vested options back. It's good because they can, I like it that companies can show the benefit of liquidity to employees through the share buyback. So other people will see, as Ashish just mentioned, also that people will see the value of the ESOP and will be involved for a longer time, incentivized for a longer time. I would note some caution here in terms of, the question that you asked just then is just if companies, buying back the ESOPs before the IPO. If you're getting quite close to the IPO, there's something which has to be recognized, and a lot of value is created in that last round between the last private round and the IPO. So I will say you can do that. The IPO market is very variable and it's much tougher recently. So there is a great benefit of having liquidity to employees who may want to buy a house or something after they've had that, working very hard for a long time. The company's performing well. But what you don't want is that there's a lot of employees 1 or 2 years later thinking, you've bought my shares back for me and you've IPO'd for a much bigger price, 50% higher or something, let's say, or even more. So you want to be very clear in flagging what your intentions are, what the processes are to do it. And key is having an evaluate also of good repute. So really have good advisor there with good standing that you can use. I think that's probably the biggest points. And the other point is, if you are going to do a buyback at a certain point, great, but make sure that there's still a good retention scheme for those key employees. So you don't want the real challenge with ESOPs, especially before IPO, is if there is a good cash out before the IPO, that naturally, we're all human, can make you assess your life and decisions and needs and can create an exit incentive. So there's a real HR component there of knowing what your employees want and making sure that there's a good retention scheme for them too. So yeah, I think that's my rough answer.
I think you made a valid point that the company needs to really strategize this. So there cannot be say that if the IPO is taking long, so that again core needs to sit together and see that what is the situation and how they can strategize. So the employee remain motivated, and even if they have to do it just before the IPO, so how they handle things, making HR and what is the expectation from the IPO as well. So it's really a kind of a complex situation, right? So ultimately, the companies has to take it very seriously and design the strategy accordingly, right? So thank you very much for your inputs. So again, coming back to Harsh, right? So we largely talking about startups and growing companies who have technology platform and looking at a very exponential growth in the near future with the help of certain funding that is maybe coming in the company, right? So but there are also very a big pool of traditional entrepreneurs in the market, right, who want to kind of transform them into a very modern organization and adopt every policy or the process or the strategy which startups are following at the moment, right? So but obviously they already have a focused system of professionals and they have access to new technology and visions, but traditional business has to go certain transformation, right? And that comes with their own challenges. Right? So I understand you interact with a lot of startups, but many of them also come from traditional business and want to understand the ecosystem. So in terms of implementing a ESOP policy, having a reserve, ultimately doing something which provide the benefit of ESOPs to employees. So what kind of potential you see in those aspects, right? Or do you think that traditional business not really should not look at this point, or if they want to look at what are the ways of strategies that they can adopt so that they can implement it effectively, and also able to benefit like the startups are benefiting.
And I think that's another fabulous question, because given the current scenario where you see that employee retention has become a problem, even if you're a startup or an MSME, ESOPs have become quite critical. Right? Structures can change, but ESOPs are critical even for MSMEs. But I would answer this question to two parts. One is why to offer ESOPs, and second is what is the value for an MSME employee that he can derive from this, because that really is the elephant in the room, right? That if you're not a privately funded company, whether you will ever be able to realize value from these shares or not. The first point, I think that point was covered very well. All of us have spoken about it, that it's employee motivation, it's employee retention, it's about getting them to align with the vision of the company. So be it an MSME, be it a startup, you all need to give ESOPs, because that really creates that sense of belonging, the sense of ownership in that company, and that really helps you grow faster. But from an MSME perspective, what becomes even more pertinent is that how is it that an employee will ever derive value from these ESOPs? So if you see in most startups also today, ESOPs are usually bought back by the company. That's a very generic thing which has been happening, that you buy back ESOPs. If we talk about MSMEs, the MSMEs are usually profit making. And a general scenario which you've seen in a lot of companies these days is just for tax efficiency purposes. They do not want to distribute dividends, rather they go for buyback structures, because that's a more efficient way of really distributing the reserves which the company is generating. And these different structures can form a very strong way of incentivizing these ESOP holders as well. Because if you do a buyback, these ESOP holders can also generate value. So there are various ways where you can think of how you can really make sure that these ESOP holders, even if you're an MSME, can get some value out of it. And that interim liquidity, even if say you give them 10% liquidity of 10% of the whole ESOP holding which they have, they can liquidate that. That will keep them motivated, that even though they're not going for a private round, it does have some value. It will give you some value. And that is, if you look at it from that perspective, yes, ESOPs can be a very strong tool in the hand of promoters and the management to motivate employees to achieve the goals of the companies.
I think thanks very much for you, and I think you made it quite well that there is a format through which the MSMEs work. Right? And first, they need to kind of make certain adjustment towards those approaches, and then think that they can work towards ESOP and actually provide certain benefits to the employees in the long run. So thank you very much for your input. So I will come back to Subit now, and this is my last question. Right, Subit. I have personally seen a couple of scenarios where founders get more excited about their employees, and they propose a situation that they want to allocate ESOPs to each and every employee, right? Whether at the time of investment or even before that, or they continue to want to follow that approach because they feel that employees are really smart, which is actually the case. But there is certain structure that you have to follow. So, do you think there are certain challenges to that thought, or would you say that there will be more instances like this in the future?
So, Nitin, rather than answering directly that the challenges before coming to challenges, or I would say that as we have discussed the other questions earlier, that what is the point of giving ESOP? Why a company or startup need to give ESOP, right? At what stage they are giving that ESOP? These are factors which should be taken into account before considering that either ESOP, when you are giving it to all employees, will it be effective, right? Because the whole idea of the ESOP pool is to be more effective, align your employees with your vision, help them or make them more committed towards the goals that you want to achieve, right? I'll give a couple of examples, and like initially what Som mentioned, that if suppose you are a product company which is developing a go-to-market product, that is a small team which is working together, and it has got a first round of investment. Now at that point in time, can you give ESOP to all the people? You should, because all the members are very critical that your product for the product and your go-to-market condition, right? However, as you start growing, what happens is you are growing your senior level as well as you're growing people who are, how to put it, are at a slightly lower end of the salaried bandwidth, right? And the motivation could be very different, right? The perception of the value on ESOP can be very different. For some certain employees, and depend upon what level they are, the net net salary in hand could be very, very more important than a piece of ESOP, which may or may not give a value in 3 to 5 years, right? So those things need to be considered by the founders at what stage they are, and then a call need to be taken whether giving ESOP to all the employees makes sense or it doesn't. Because even if in your excitement, if you do extend the ESOP to all the employees, if the employees don't see value in it, and it could be multiple reasons, right? Then essentially what you have done is you have given a certain stake to a lot of people, but it has not achieved the result or the goal that you wanted to achieve. So that need to be kept into mind. Now coming to the question actually which you asked, that can it create challenges in future? That is an interesting question, and if you remember my first answer, that when you create an ESOP pool, it is not as simple as that. And I think my co-panelist Som also mentioned that it needs to be done in a very professional manner. All the aspects need to be captured. That if an employee say is leaving, what will happen to his ESOP? Does he get to keep it, or the company will buy it back? Right, once the vesting will happen, or how the liquidity will happen, how the promoters have thought about it. If the company is signing SHA or documents, have you taken the POA from all the employees? Have you explained it what the POA is for? Multiple things. So, and if those things are not paid attention to, because once a ESOP is vested, the employee who is holding the ESOP, he is technically a shareholder as well. And as a shareholder, he or she does have certain rights in the company, right? So what you need to be very careful is that you are not infringing on the right of a shareholder, right? And you do need to take adequate step so that his right or her right is not getting infringed, but he or she is protected as well, right? Because in one way, while he or she is shareholder, they are a minority shareholder. So you need to make sure that whatever rights they enjoy, those are protected, right? So these are the aspects that need to be taken care of, and that's why the entire ESOP need to be structured in a very professional manner. It should not be taken lightly. It is a very, very powerful tool if done properly.
Thank you so much for your inputs, and I think what you want to kind of convey is that the thought should be synchronized. Maybe you can convince about your vision of to few people, to convincing it all who may be at the bottom level of your organization. So the thought should be synchronized, not really just from excitement or to showcase a differentiating approach. You should just submit, because that after that you have to follow comprehensive process and meet all the compliances. So thank you very much for it. So I think I'm pretty much done with my questions, but we still, just cross the time. Before I take, concluding remarks from the speakers, I will just take one or two questions from the participant. So one participant has just, questioned that why don't the investors also dilute, given the ESOPs helps everyone. So, in a cap table, when the ESOPs are service created, it takes the shareholding from the founders or the promoters. The investor comes in next. So, so the Chief Patel wants to understand why the investor do not dilute his shareholding, why ESOP pool is created. Right. So I think Harsh, what you want to answer that?
Sure, Nitin. No, I think that's a good question, Jeet. So the way to look at it is that why is it that the founder holds equity in the company? He holds equity in the company because he's building that company out. So it should not be looked at as founder equity, it's management equity. It's the equity which the management team is holding so that they can keep building the company here and again. The stake which the investors are holding, they hold it because they've invested certain money in the company. So they are not going to dilute. Management was a part of founder's equity. And hence, whenever you want to dilute or when you want to create a pool, it always comes from that pool. It cannot come from the investors' pool because investors have paid due amount for that. They will never dilute for this. It was a job of the management, and hence always the management dilutes. But yeah, would love to see if anybody else would like to add over here with some investors because they see this every day.
So yeah, I can add my 2 cents. So see, this I think how dilution is being looked it also should need to be considered when we're talking about a startup, right, which is in early stage. They usually the ESOP is given at a face value to the employee. Usually, I'm not saying that's true, right? And as Harsh very rightly said, an investor when he is investing in the company, he's investing in not just an idea, but the vision that this will grow bigger and what it can be created, right? And then in the earlier question, what Som mentioned that who are the employees who ideally be given ESOP, who complement the founders, right? Who will help the founder to build a company which will actually be valuable. Right? So in that early stages, basically what this senior member do is they complement the founder to make a cohesive unit which will build the company. All right, and when you're looking at that, then founders basically strengthening themselves by building that cohesive unit, and hence in earlier stage, it is expected that it comes from the founder pool. But as the company mature, if you look at any mature company, when they give ESOP, the ESOP is given at the market value. It is no longer provided as a face value. And the employee who is receiving the ESOP, he reaps the benefit on the value that he creates going forward. And that ESOP is diluted to everyone, not just the founder. So that distinction needs to be understood because at that point, the company is already built. You are not issuing a ESOP to strengthen the core team or build the core team.
So thank you, Sobit. Thank you, Harsh. I think in the interest of time, I'm not able to take any further questions from the participants. But I will request from eminent speakers to give their concluding remarks. Just keep it limited to a couple of minutes. So I will start with Mr. Ashish. Yes, please, your concluding remarks.
Yeah, so like as we have said, ESOP's policy has to be, I would say that ESOP policy and the rollout of the ESOP scheme is very, very important. It should contain a vision how ESOP policy or ESOP will be invested based upon the growth of the company. That is the main thing. Other things can be planned later on, but that is the first brick to be installed.
Thank you, Ashish. Thank you. Som, your concluding remarks, please.
Sorry, just my computer was delayed. Sorry. Yeah, thanks. Very interesting session. I think the thing that I would like people to take away is just that I also saw some comments in the chat. Looking for benchmarks. ESOP is something which really needs a lot of thought. every part of it needs a lot of thought. You can look at benchmarks as sort of guidance, but really the key thing is, what do you need to build to achieve your business plan? Who do you need to achieve your business plan? And really, it's a human thing. What is their proposition? Put yourself in their shoes. Is it a good? Does it make sense? It's not an easy thing, but it's a very important thing. So requires a custom approach to each situation. Thanks.
Thank you. Harsh, your concluding remarks, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a common consensus. ESOP is good. Use it well. It's really powerful. But it's about how you plan it out. I think who needs it, when you need it. And this is applicable for everyone. Be a small company, be a large company, be it a startup, be it an MSME. Everybody can benefit from it when used judiciously in the right fashion, the right manner. And it can really help you grow the business much longer. So, yeah.
Thank you, Harsh. Yes. So with your concluding remarks, please.
Not much to add, Nitin. I would just supplement to what Ashish said and what we initially discussed, that while all of us have the same message, that it's good and very powerful tool. I think it needs to be very transparently explained to the employees and how it can be, how you can exercise, how to vest, when it will happen. It is not a day one liquidity, security. All those things I think need to be explained in a manner that the people who are receiving it are transparently understand. So again, going back to what I think Tom, Som, Harsh, and Ashish mentioned, it need to be done in a proper manner. There are a lot of advisors today, fortunately, who are available, who can help the startups to structure it in a right manner. And I would say that the founders should definitely use it, see what are the best practices being used, and employ those.
Thank you, sir. So I thank every eminent speaker for their valuable inputs and providing a detailed overview on ESOPs, how it should be planned and how it should be allocated, how the employees can kind of get the benefit of that, and how it overall helps in the growth of the company in the long run. Right. So overall, I can say that from a startup ecosystem point of view and from a equity investment ecosystem point of view, ESOP is a very critical aspect. And when a company is really looking to transform something on the ground, they need to build a strong team. And I think there is no better tool than ESOP currently in the market to kind of increase the potential of achieving the growth ultimately on the ground. Right. So I would again thank every speakers for their valuable inputs, and I think the audience has really benefited through it, and they can better plan their strategy for long-term growth. And I apologize to the participant that I could not take every question there.
I've answered the questions in the text actually.
Right. And we will try to kind of connect with some of the participants. So if they have any further queries or questions, we'll be try to help them with those queries. So once again, thanks for every eminent speakers, and also thank participants for their time to kind of participate in the webinar. And we as a Resurgent India, we continue to kind of organize more and more every session on different aspects of investment and growth point of view. Right. So thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Nitin. Thank you, Nitin, and the Resurgent team for giving us the opportunity to come in here. And thank you, Nitin, for conducting this such a beautiful session. Thank you.
Thank you, Nitin. It was a wonderful session. Thanks, Resurgent team.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, panelists.
Thank you, sir.